Good morning, everybody. We are going to get started in just a minute. We are going to allow everybody to get logged in and get connected with their audio before we get started. Again, I want to welcome everybody. We do encourage turning on your cameras if you are comfortable. The best way for us to get to know you is by seeing your face with your name and associating you with your company. So we would love to see your faces if you are comfortable. Again, I'm going to give just a few more seconds for everybody to get logged in and get connected to the audio. Oh, it's so good to see everybody. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today for our Science and Technology Committee. My name is Kirby Davis, and I am the Membership Services Associate here at the Chamber of Commerce of the Palm Beaches. Today we have Albert Slapp. Albert is president and co-founder of Coastal Risk Consulting, LLC, a geospatial technology modeling and data analytics company located in Boca Raton, Florida. Coastal Risks technology empowers individuals, businesses, and governments in the U.S. and globally to accelerate resilience to floods, natural hazards, and climate impacts. Prior to launching Coastal Risk, Mr. Slapp was nationally recognized environmental trial attorney and law professor. Over the years, Mr. Slapp used America's environmental laws to protect public health and the environment by stopping water and air pollution, toxic waste dumping, and by requiring local governments to replace aging and polluting sewer infrastructure. For his outstanding legal work, Mr. Slapp was the recipient in 2014 of the prestigious Marjory Stoneman Douglas Defender of the Everglades Award. We are so happy to have you, Albert, and thank you so much for joining us today. I do want to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded, so please keep that in mind. And if you would stay muted until asked otherwise, we do plan for Q&A. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box and we will get to them at the very end of the program. And with that being said, I will hand it over to you, Albert.
Thanks, Kirby. Welcome, everyone. Let me get the presentation queued up here. Is my screen up there?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, again, good morning. I'm Albert Slapp, the CEO and co-founder of Coastal Risk, a risk assessment tech startup in Boca Raton. We're new members of the chamber, so I want to thank Kirby.
Came up with the 8.5%, right?
I want to thank Kirby and Kelly and the staff who have made us feel so welcome here. It's very refreshing because this is not necessarily the experience with many such membership organizations. So we're a prop tech, or now something called resilience tech provider. It's an online service. As Kirby mentioned, it's available for any property in the US and globally. But first, a bit about me and my co-founder. That was a nice introduction, Kirby, thank you. My co-founder, Dr. Len Berry, is someone who some of you might know from FAU. He was the provost at FAU for some number of years, and he was also the head of the FAU Center for Environmental Studies for, I think, over 20 years. But he is a world-renowned scientist. He and Dr. Brian Soden from the prestigious University of Miami Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science were experts who I had worked with over the years as a trial attorney. And when I retired from the practice of law in 2014, a few weeks into retirement, I got a call from Len and Brian Soden, and we talked about the fact that major engineering firms could do risk assessments for large corporations or municipalities, but individuals really small businesses, individuals, even smaller local governments really did not have access to fast, accurate, and affordable property-specific risk assessments other than what was being done by the large engineering firms. So we agreed that we would try to do a startup, not something that I had a lot of experience in, to create an automated system, cloud-based system, something called software as a service, to provide these risk assessments to people who could not otherwise get them. So so we did that. Now Brian Soden and Dr. Berry and one of our, I see one of our attendees today, Professor Brian McNulty from University of Miami. We have a core of science and technology experts that are the backbone of the company. But my goal in attending conferences and webinars like this is, will I hear something new? Will I learn something new that I didn't know before? And that may seem like a high bar, but today as a speaker, I hope I can clear that bar by providing all of you some news you can use, some new information about the area of real property risk assessments. And we'll be looking at this broadly, but we'll also bring it down and focus on Palm Beach County. And so this is a bit of a long slide deck. I'm not going to cover every slide, but it will be available from the chamber. And if anyone wants any further information or has questions, my email and phone number will be on the last slide of the deck. So I'm not going to give you Climate Change 101 talk. I'm going to assume that everyone has read what's in the newspapers about climate change and all of the damage and loss that we're seeing every year mounting and mounting from floods, natural hazards, and climate change, whether it's here in South Florida with hurricanes, or whether it's wildfires on the West Coast or tornadoes in the Midwest. We're all pretty familiar with it. And look what just happened the last few weeks down in Texas and the Southeast with that extreme cold weather. So we're all in what I'm calling the same leaky boat because we all live on planet Earth. And we have to start rowing in the same direction. We all have to work as a team. No one group can fix what has to be fixed in our society, and especially in coastal communities in Southeast Florida. So who are the rowers? Who are the stakeholders that need to be rowing in the same direction? Well, first of all, we have a public infrastructure that in some areas is failing already because of king tides. So you've heard about down in Miami, Miami-Dade County and Miami Beach, elevating roads, hardening utilities with gray, green, and blue infrastructure, improving building codes, trying to get private property owners to work with the public agencies. But alone, public infrastructure is not going to save the day, and it's not going to save the day for everybody. How do we know that? We know that because there's not enough money, and we can simply look at the capital improvement programs of any particular local government, and you're going to see that not every neighborhood gets saved currently. So then we have to look at commercial real estate, offices where people work, or apartment buildings where people live. Do they even know what's at stake? Are they reporting to the public the risks that are associated with their buildings? And are they making risk mitigation investments where appropriate? And the answer is not generally, not so much. What about homeowners? Well, do homeowners have do they have an oar? Are they supposed to be rowing? And the answer is yes, because this improvements in public infrastructure, again, raising roads, improved stormwater systems, pumps, it's not going to help everybody. There is personal responsibility with all these stakeholders. So again, homeowners need to do better due diligence. Home buyers, they need to have proper insurance. Most homeowners in the United States and Florida do not have flood insurance. They don't have flood insurance. So how do we get a resilient society when most homeowners don't have flood insurance? That's just a fact, and from FEMA. And what sort of risk mitigation investments are appropriate given the pocketbook of different sectors of the residential housing market? And then finally, banking and insurance. Are the banks accounting for climate impacts in their underwriting? Generally, no. Are they requiring proper flood insurance inside and outside FEMA flood zones? And we'll talk a little bit about that, but FEMA flood zones are not the be all and the end all of risk assessment. They really aren't. Example, FEMA flood zones do not include heavy rainfall flooding. They don't include heavy rainfall flooding. Now, everybody in South Florida knows that we have neighborhoods that flood when there's no hurricane. They flood because of heavy rainfall, and that's not included in FEMA. And maybe banks and insurance companies should be making risk mitigation loans to homeowners where appropriate. Okay. So what's the key question? What's the problem? The problem is that for any particular company, and I put the word company here, but you could take out the word company and you could put in the word municipality, school district, healthcare system. Are physical risks concentrated in the portfolio? So everyone lives in a local jurisdiction, and many of us live in Palm Beach County, but you live in a town. Towns have critical infrastructure, schools, healthcare facilities, nursing homes. So the question is physical risk concentrated to such an extent that one or two events could create a catastrophic economic loss? What's the value at risk for these particular assets? And how can automated risk assessment tools help solve this problem? So part of the solution is what we have created, and there's others as well, that automated tools, because of the speed of technology, allows owners, developers, investors, lenders, local governments, emergency operations, utility companies, water and sewer, to identify properties that are particularly vulnerable to risks. This, by doing a risk heat map, it enables resources to be focused on the vulnerable sites for further risk assessment or management. What we want to do is to tie hazards and risks to individual buildings. So, I could go over each one of these, but what's all this good for? Why are we doing this? Because we don't have good due diligence right now in buying and selling properties and investing in properties and borrowing, insuring. Are your insurance coverages even adequate? Well, I'm in this FEMA zone, but do I have enough insurance? It's an open question. Protecting properties. What's the ROI, return on investment? What's the cost benefit of risk mitigation? A lot of risk mitigation isn't being done at the property level because folks who own properties really don't know, well, the cost benefit. If I make this expenditure, is it worth it? What am I gaining from it? I know the cost of any particular, like if I just think about your home, if you were going to put on impact windows, or you were going to put on roll down shutters, you can find out what the cost is. But what's the benefit? What would I lose if I do have hurricane damage and a whole bunch of water comes into my home? Is insurance really going to cover all that? And a lot of people, both on the residential side and on the commercial side thinks insurance is a get out of jail free card. Insurance, if anybody's ever been through one of these events and had to deal with insurance, you know, insurance is not a get out of jail free card. It really isn't. And then last but not least, disclosing risks. Corporations, especially multinational and public corporations, are more and more obligated to disclose physical risks to their assets. And under the Biden administration, there's signals now that this trend that started in Europe, these letters here, ESG, TCFD, this European requirements to disclose physical risks, it could be adopted soon by the SEC for public companies. So, you know, we talk about individual properties. Is it a good property or not? But more and more commercial real estate investors are asking the question, is the market, is the local jurisdiction in the market that I want to be in up to the task of keeping the streets dry and the water running and this and sewage and electric? Are they up to the task? Do they really have planned infrastructure investments? What's the timing, the funding sources? Do they have a resiliency plan? One of our clients in commercial real estate investment trust, a multi-billion-dollar outfit out of California, said something funny to me. He said, Albert, you help us get as close to the hot markets as possible without getting our feet wet. I want you to just think about that, because obviously, you know, this is the chamber. This is the Chamber of Commerce of the Palm Beaches. So the Chamber of Commerce is involved in economic development. They care about economic development. So if now and in the future more and more commercial real estate investors are asking the question, is Palm Beach County up to the task of keeping the streets dry and the lights on? And of course, we saw what happened recently down in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi. I have a stepdaughter down in Jackson, Mississippi, and you've probably been seeing the news, and she still doesn't have water. And this is weeks later, and you know, she's been in a hotel, and now she's back, but there's low pressure, and she's showering in water that's not fit for human consumption. It's just terrible. So would somebody want to move into the Jackson, Mississippi market right now? I don't think so, until they get their act together on the infrastructure and weatherize it. So here's this slide. On the left is an apartment building, rental apartment building in West Palm Beach. And we had a REIT client that was looking to buy this building, and they did buy it. And we showed them that for all the risks that we look at, and in particular sea level rise, that it really was not an issue. It's not an issue in 2020, and it's not an issue in 2035, and it's not an issue out to 2050. And you can see that there's no pixels. But on the right, what you're seeing is the building where the Chamber of Commerce is located in. And what's the address there? Whatever the address is there, you can see the building in the black box in sort of the middle of the frame. Now there's a building and there's some green space. But when you look at the top frame and it says 0 flood days, there is no tidal flooding, king tide, inside the meets and bounds of the property layer of that building currently. But if you look out on the street, and I believe I've talked to Kelly and Kirby about this, you can see down here some king tide flooding in the street. And of course, they're right up against the intercoastal. You can see the marina over here and the boats on the right. So it's flooding today on the king tide. What is the city doing about it? Is it in the capital improvement plan? Because if you apply the NOAA model, the sea level rise model, and we don't use the extreme or the high, we use an intermediate high model of NOAA. And we're showing you here the aerial extent, which are the colored pixels that you can see, the number of days of flooding, and the depth. So you can see that when you go out 15 years, it gets quite a bit worse and starts incurring onto the property a little bit. And then when you get out to 2050, if nothing's done, it's not good. You know, it would make ingress and egress. It's almost every day of king tide flooding, and the ingress and egress to this building is going to be problematical. But compare it to the one on the left. This apartment building is in West Palm Beach. This is in West Palm Beach. 0, 313 days. Not every property is the same. Not every elevation of every property is the same. Here's a property you can see over here on the left. You can see the beach on the right. It's the second house in from the beach, right? It has no 2050 flooding, no impact from even a Category 5 storm. So the client whose parents passed away, who was in charge of selling this house for himself and his 5 sisters, was concerned that a potential buyer would, because they were so close to the beach, be concerned about storm surge and flooding, and wanted to do a report. Wasn't afraid. I mean, maybe the realtor was afraid, but he wasn't afraid, and came back stellar, just a stellar report. He listed the property for $5.5 million, showed the report to the buyer, and it sold for $5.4 million in 2020. So that just gives you, an understanding that we're not an advocacy group. We're not a nonprofit. This is not some, I'm not here to tell you a lot of doom and gloom. What I'm here to say is that science is the science. And where you have situations like here, where you already have people go out in the king tide season and there's puddles there, and some people say it's going to get worse because of climate change and the rising sea levels. You look at, for example, Miami-Dade County. They have a new mayor, Daniela Levine Cava, and maybe some of you have read the Herald, where she just came out with a sea level rise strategy. It's at that level already. But there's boots on the ground, people working on fixing these issues and staying in place, and not doom and gloom. We're going to have to retreat, blah blah blah. So we have to figure out where the hot spots are. Left apartment building, not a hot spot. Where the Chamber of Commerce is, a hot spot. Beach block of Palm Beach, multi-million-dollar home, not a hot spot. Oh, what about Mar-a-Lago? I think everyone knows about Mar-a-Lago. Well, by 2050, it looks to me like about a third of Mar-a-Lago's underwater. Well, can this be filled? Can the seawall, this is the bay side, this is the ocean, can the seawall be raised? Maybe, but it comes up through the ground. What we have is, archaeological dead corals underneath us, like Swiss cheese, that allows the sea water to be pushed up, and the fresh water, as sea levels rise, will be pushed up through the ground. Can it be dealt with? Maybe. It's going to cost a lot of money, but this is what the modeling shows for this area. Now, by the way, I just saw yesterday, if you look here on the right, this I think it's either this house or this house, is also is owned by or is being marketed by Eric Trump for $49 million. I think it's this house or this house. I'm not exactly sure. You can see it's high and dry. It's not by the intercoastal, and it's so high it doesn't have storm surge impacts. So just because I'm closer to the beach and I can walk down a set of steps to get to the beach doesn't mean that I'm in a riskier place. I may be in a safer place. So here's something that's really hot off the press, and this is the new FEMA National Risk Index. So when I say that, folks are concerned about what's happening in the community, FEMA has put out, and this is brand new, it just came out at the end of December of last year, a national risk index. So it combines 18 different types of risks. There's the 18 types of risk. Okay, well, and you can see that Miami-Dade County down here is very high, and Palm Beach County is relatively high for the 18 combined risks. Also, it looks at community resilience, which you can see that Miami-Dade County is very high, and Palm Beach County is, I think by the color, is relatively moderate community resilience. And you can see that some of these rural areas over here are very low resilience. FEMA defines community resilience as the ability of a community to prepare for anticipated natural hazards and adapt to changing conditions to withstand and recover rapidly from disruptions. And it looks at 6 factors: human well-being, cultural, social, economic, financial, infrastructure, institutional governments, community capacity, and environment. So when FEMA rates Palm Beach County as relatively low on the resilience, or relatively low or relatively moderate on the resilience scale, that's something that we have to take into consideration. And then there's another metric, and all of this is going into our risk footprint technology, that the expected annual losses in Palm Beach County are relatively high. Not very high as Miami-Dade County, but it is relatively high. So let me skip down here to what are we trying to get individuals and companies and governments to do? We want them to thoughtfully and mindfully go through a 6-step process to accelerate their resilience. 1 is screen your portfolio of properties. 2, for those that show up in the red zone for higher risk, you want to dive down and quantify those risks for the individual properties. Then you want to look at the cost benefit, and to do that, you have to do value at risk studies, which is part of our technology. And you also want to estimate your risk mitigation costs. So you do the cost benefit. And then we can help with our advisory services to recommend solutions. And this is an example. This image on the right is a self-closing flood barrier in an underground parking garage in Houston, Texas during Hurricane Harvey. And you can see the Hurricane Harvey water on the right and some wetness on the left, and the water is being held back, which saved this property from having its foundation cracked from the hydrostatic pressures of the flood, and it saved the automobiles from floating away that were left there during the hurricane. And as you know, it's not just in South Florida, but throughout the coasts of the United States, we have many underground parking garages and that are unprotected. So that's just an example of how this 6-step process brings a building owner to the point of saying, you know, I've got to make this investment. I have to protect my building, and I have to protect the people who live in this building, who work in this building, and entrust their vehicles to park underneath my building. This is what downtown Houston looked like during Hurricane Harvey. I'm going to give you just a few use cases for these automated risk assessment. This was written up in the news. A client bought the historical property of the billionaire Wayne Huizenga down in Fort Lauderdale in the Los Olas Isles. It was really flooding already on the King Tides, but they wanted to build some spec homes on the property, and they brought in $1 million in fill and raised it from about 3 feet to 6 feet, and then put the slab on top of the additional fill. And that's really, I mean, this is back in 2016 when we just got started. But you can see, if you go back to the Herald article about Miami-Dade County and Mayor Daniela Levine Cava's strategy to build higher and build further back. Now, this is not further back. This got 100 foot of bulkhead for their yacht, but you can see what this spec house, how spectacular this spec house turned out. Here you can see a drone footage of a shopping center in Kingwood, Texas after Hurricane Harvey. And you can see an empty spot over here. And in January of 2017, a client came to us and said, should we put a PetSmart big box store in that empty space? And we want your opinion. So you can see on the modeling on the left that it looks like, from a heavy rainfall standpoint, a big bathtub of red ink. So we said, you know what, we don't usually say this, but you should walk away from this site, which they did. And that's why they're one of our best clients today, because 8 months later, this is what the drone footage looked like. About 4 feet of water went into each one of these buildings. So not good. We're just going to jump down. You know, how do we work with realtors and potential buyers? So a buyer and his realtor come to us, and they want to buy this gorgeous estate on the eastern shore of Maryland. And they want to do the modeling. You can see that this house is pretty high up from the water. This is a Chesapeake Bay down here. So it's built up, it's quite high off the water, but there's a barn here, and then you have the driveway to get to the house. So what does the modeling show? Well, it shows that you can see the little space here where the house is pretty high and dry, but that a Category 3 hurricane would impact quite a bit around it, including the roadway and the garage. And that even though the house itself is dry, the barn is going underwater, or, you know, to a certain extent by 2035. So you can see here's a view from the house down to the Chesapeake Bay. So in about 15 years, a tide flooding and sea level rise will impact the barn and some of the ingress and egress almost every day. There are going to be costs associated with raising the barn and the driveway. Is this a bad investment? For, you know, there's no right and there's no wrong. You have to look at the property itself. You have to look at the hazards. You have to look at the person and their pocketbook, and you have to look at the community. But just as if the home inspection had uncovered a bad roof, we would recommend that that they negotiate the price. So I'm going to just kind of zip through this, and we can open it up to some question and answers. But our technology, the risk footprint, is now being integrated with the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED program and the RELY. 'They have a program on resilience called RELY. And why is this happening? And probably most of you who are attending this understand, you know, what the Green Building Council for the last 25 years has been trying to accomplish with its green building program, which is looking at what your building is doing to the planet, mostly in terms of CO2 emissions, but other things like recycling and other things, energy usage. So what's your building doing to the planet or your assets? But I think everybody can understand that that's only the first side of the coin. The other side of the climate coin is what's the planet doing to your building? What's the planet doing to your assets? So you have to look at the two sides of the coins and put them together. And the Green Building Council is now realizing that they have to put these two things together holistically. So they have their lead projects and this RELI 2.0 rating system, which basically fits very much in line with risk footprint. There's going to be automatic points that'll be thrown into the hopper for lead and RELI and pilot credits if the clients and the users of Green Building Council's program get their risk footprint. I could go into that in detail. But again, it's not just nonprofits like the Green Building Council. The environmental bankers just literally in 2021 came out with a report, Consideration for Bankers, to include site-specific climate risk models in their phase 1 environmental site assessments, do a portfolio-wide review of climate risk data, looking at what's high risk and medium risk and low risk for further review. And they've even come out with some things, basic things that building owners can do, like set the elevator floor stop above the flood level, harden the building envelope, relocation of MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing components above the flood levels, provide methods to protect sensitive building components, backup systems, raise seawalls, invest in more efficient AC chillers, larger roof drains, hurricane-proof glass, doorway barriers, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just like an advocacy group or a nonprofit, but here you have the Environmental Bankers Association really getting down into the weeds about what needs to be done. So to finish up, what should folks be doing? They should utilize the new environmental risk assessment tools to better understand their flood, natural hazard, and climate risks at purchase, opportunity, investment, mortgage origination, insurance, due diligence, and consider making resilience enhancing investments in properties with high risk where there's a good ROI. And finally, working together, we can achieve a resilient future. We just all have to pick up our oars in the leaky boat and start rowing like heck to get the boat to shore. And the only way we're going to do it is together. So I want to stop there. We have probably about 20 minutes for Q&A. And as I said, if anyone has any other questions, they should feel free to contact me.
All right, I do see that we have James. You have a question?
How you doing, Albert? That was very good.
Hey, thank you.
Okay, where I live, right, I'm east of 95, but I'm like 1/10 of a mile. But according to FEMA, I'm in a flood zone. So then I have to look at a purchase flood insurance, which is a cost to me. But I see it as myself as chances of me getting flooded by the intercoastal or the ocean is slim to none. So is there anything that can be done to alleviate that?
Okay, well, I didn't go, and I'm glad you asked that question because I didn't really, dive into that in too detailed. So when you get a report, and again, I'm not here to try and sell you, but if you go to riskfootprint.com, there's the landing page has a side for residential, single family home, and for business and government. But if you go to the single family home, you can buy a report. And it shows you the FEMA flood zone, but it also shows you satellite-based heavy rainfall, riverine, and NOAA storm surge, which we do a particular way. And if we really wanted to dive into it, Professor McNulty, I'm not calling on him to help explain how we utilize the storm surge. But probably if you're east of 95, you're in the NOAA storm surge zone for either category 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, depending on how far back you are. I just did one for somebody in, I guess it was Frenchman's Creek or something up near Juneau, you know, and he's at the very edge of the category 5 zone. Typically a FEMA flood map, when you compare it to the NOAA storm surge model, is showing less risk because it's fixed at the 100-year return frequency, you know, whatever, you know, I mean, there's debate on how valuable that terminology is. But what we show you is all the different risk factors, not just FEMA. So you can't look at FEMA alone and say, it's not binary. The risk of your home, James, or anybody's home or their business is not binary anymore. It's not, I'm outside the FEMA flood zone, I'm safe. I'm inside the FEMA flood zone, I'm not safe. Or as you said, I'm in the FEMA flood zone, but I don't think that there's much chance of me getting hit by X, Y, or Z. But, you know, there's, if you look at Hurricane Michael and Mexico Beach up in the Tampa Panhandle area, most of those people were in a FEMA X zone. Even though they were real close to the Gulf there, they were in a FEMA X zone. And that means that legally, they did not have to have flood insurance on their mortgage. If you have a mortgage and you're in a FEMA 100-year zone, by law, you must have the flood insurance. But they didn't. And most of them didn't have the flood insurance, and they can't find their homes. There's just like basically a cement foundation left. And most of those people is completely washed away, and they have no insurance. So it's a great tragedy. So when I'm not suggesting, you know, that sort of a dire situation is applicable to your home, because I don't know. If you could make broad doom and gloom predictions, we wouldn't have a business. I showed you 2 properties in West Palm Beach, the Chambers building and an expensive apartment building that my client bought. Completely different. I would have said one thing, you know, go ahead and buy this. But if somebody was saying, should I buy this building that the Chamber of Commerce is located in? I would have to tell them that they have to have some serious conversations with the city about their plan and a deeper dive into the capital improvement plan to see what they're talking about for that street, because ingress and egress is going to be compromised. It is going to be it's compromised now. And you're trying to walk across the street in King Tide, you need your galoshes. You know, Kirby and Kelly don't want to get their nice shoes wet with salt water that they just went out to the Sawgrass Mills Mall and got on, you know, beautiful shoes on sale. And by the way, I tell my wife, she loves shoes. She loves shoes. Don't go to the Sawgrass Mill malls when it's predicting rain. Why? Because the parking lot floods. It has nothing to do with sea level rise. It has nothing to do with storm surge. But if you're at the Sawgrass Mills Mall in a heavy rainstorm, your car may float away. And everybody knows that, or everybody that lives down here. But when we moved down here, Julie didn't know, but I told her, don't go out there in the rain. People do, you know, what can I say? People's cars float away. But you know, that's the kind of thing that we have to look at, the holistic picture, not the binary, I'm in or I'm out. Does that make sense, James? that's a long-winded answer to your question. I'm sorry.
It makes sense, but like I say, 95 for me, I can go at the end of the street and I see 90. I'm less than a tenth of a mile away from it, but
Right.
I called up the insurance company. They say, well, you're east of 95. We can't delineate where you live, but there's people that live closer to the water from east of 95. But me, I go out my end of my street and there's 95 right out there. So, that's what I'm saying. I'm east of 95.
Well, the only other thing I could say is that depending on your elevation certificate, if your elevation certificate showed that your first floor was above the FEMA base flood elevation, then you could get a reduction in your insurance. But I don't know that, but if you called me offline, we could talk about it.
Right. Great question, James. Do we have any other questions? Tom.
Yes, hi, thank you, Kirby. Great to meet you. Thank you for the great talk. You mentioned earlier how some properties are able to invest and to raise their, I guess, sea level, certain buildings and structures. Certainly it's easier to do before construction, right, to raise a building by 1, 2, 3 feet. But right, is this possible for existing buildings, and is it incredibly expensive depending on the building?
I think it is possible for single family homes, and there is an industry that does that. It's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but, land is, especially land that is near the water or has water views. People aren't, people love the water and they love water views. And I think that's sort of a basic human nature, and it's not going away. It really isn't. And I'll tell you a story. I think there's going to be an article coming out in Bloomberg that may mention this little anecdote, but since you asked, and we do have some time. So a client in Palm Beach, not West Palm Beach, in Palm Beach, buys a report, and it's a multi-million-dollar home near the bike path, near the Worth Avenue Bridge, near the bike path on the intercoastal side. And it's not a good report. So the client wants to have a conversation, and we get on the phone. And he says, look, Albert, I'm a biker. I see the king tides on the bike path here. I know it's real. I'm going to buy this house for $4 million, and I'm going to knock it down. And I'm going to build an $8 million home. And here's my thinking. I just want to bounce it off you. My thinking is, and again, he's not raising it in a sense of, raising up, putting pilings under it. He's knocking it down. $4 million home in Palm Beach, going to knock it down. So he says, the people on my block are the CEOs of some of the largest corporations in America. I believe that Palm Beach is not going to allow us to go underwater. The tax ratables for our multi-million-dollar homes are so important that they'll raise the streets, they'll improve the storm drains, they'll raise the bike path, and and this will be a good investment for me. And again, I go back to these 4 factors: the property, the hazards, the person in their pocketbook, and the community. It's not for me to tell this person, which he did buy it, knocked it down, rebuilt it, and became a very good client, because it turned out that he was the CEO of a major lender to real estate investment trusts. And we've done, a number all around the country of helping him with the underwriting of loans to real estate investment trusts based on physical climate risk factors. So it was up to that person to make a reasoned decision of, is it cost beneficial, cost effective for me, or should I just find another location? Now, Tom, in terms of commercial, the commercial buildings, in my view, the existing, which is 95% of all buildings are existing buildings, not the new ones being built, must protect themselves. The underground parking garages have to be protected. That self-closing flood barrier, let's say it was $150,000 on a $50 million building. That's not going to break the bank. They need to do that. It's part of their obligation. Are most of them doing it? No, they're not. And it's true of healthcare facilities. It's true of affordable multi-family housing. It's, I can tell you that there's emergency operations centers that are vulnerable and unprotected. So it's quite a wide spectrum of buildings and stakeholders that need to up their game and protect their buildings, because it's not only their obligation to their shareholders or their own pocketbooks if they don't have shareholders, but they're part of society. They're in this leaky boat. They need to grab an oar and start rowing, and not saying, oh, Mayor Suarez and Mayor this and Mayor that. They're going to bail it out. They're going to solve this problem. The infrastructure, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to put an underground, protection for my underground parking garage. They're going to save us all. Well, they'll be waiting around a long time for that to happen. It's not realistic thinking.
Thanks, Albert.
All right, another good question. Oh, I see another hand raised. Yes.
Hi there. Thanks for holding this, and thanks for the great talk. My name is Sharon Majumdar. I'm a professor at the University of Miami. My colleague Brian Soden, and I'm Brian McNaldy's boss. But Brian knows like literally 100 times as much about all of this than I do. So I'm just here learning. It's great. I have a fairly broad question about communication strategies. So there's an enormous amount of great work that's going on. So yourselves and many others, the local governments are all sort of putting out sort of very, very frequently sort of releases about resilience. There's a ton of media articles about it, but yet there's a very large fraction of the public who probably is just not aware about the seriousness of it or what they have to do. What would be your recommendation for sort of how the various counties should sort of work on communication strategies to a public that might be recalcitrant?
Yeah, it's complex, Sharon. It's a great question. And it's one that I think about an awful lot, because we, in addition to doing the technology, we also do some of these vulnerability assessments for local governments. We've done under Florida DEP funding, we've done Key Biscayne, we did Miami Shores, we did Bay Harbor Islands, and we did part of Bal Harbour. And you're entirely 100% right that even when, and not every local community has gotten their DEP grant yet to do these vulnerability assessments. So you have that issue, but more money's coming down and more of these studies are being done. But you can do a study and then really not advertise it or communicate it very well to the local residents and voters. And there's really, sort of a two-edged sword, because the local governments need to do these studies if they want to get in line for state grants. But on the other hand, they don't want to publicize the studies that much because they don't want to scare the pants off the voters and the taxpayers, or have them claim that they're depressing the real estate market. The other thing that you'll notice, Sharon and Brian and others, I know you guys are in Miami-Dade County, when you see the new strategy, which I've read, it's hot off the press, just a week or so old, of the new strategy from the county, it's a good start. It really is, but it does not put any requirements and doesn't look like it's going in the direction of any requirements on individual homeowners or commercial real estate or multifamily. So it's still more about infrastructure and ribbon cutting and what the government is going to do for you, as opposed to, we're in the boat with you, we have an oar, grab an oar and start rowing. That's not the message that they're giving in their strategy, which I talk to some of these politicians, elected officials at Miami Beach, Miami-Dade County, and I always say the same thing, that if you just keep talking about what we're going to do as the government, and it sets up a straw man that we can solve this for everyone, and that's not true. So that when a big one comes and people aren't prepared, the amount of damage and loss and the setback is going to be greater, because you didn't say we're all in the same leaky boat. You didn't say that. You said, we're here, we're the government, we're going to solve this issue for you, as opposed to, we can't solve it for everybody. Get an oar and start rowing, which means fix your building, make some investments. Now, not everybody can do that. Not every, so yes, could there be grant programs? Could there be, there's this whole PACE funding, could there be PACE funding for elderly and for people on fixed incomes and low income and communities of color? Yes, of course. But it still doesn't, it doesn't get to the point of the messaging, as I think, Sharon, maybe you were saying, you're shaking your head, that you're agreeing that this messaging is still a top down and not a bottom up.
Right.
Thank you.
Great questions. We are coming up to 10 o'clock. I do want to do some self-introductions before we jump off the call. If you would just say your name, your company, your title, and a very brief, because we do only have a few minutes, description of what you do. Kelly, do you mind starting us off?
Sure, I'll start. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Albert, for that very interesting presentation. I will tell you, when I met Albert, he sent me that picture of the chamber building, and it was kind of alarming, and it definitely got my attention. And I figured it would do the same thing for all the rest of you as well. So thank you so much for your presentation. I am Kelly Finelli. I'm the membership director here at the chamber, and I thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thanks, Kelly. Joan.
Good morning, everyone. That was a very, very, very interesting talk. It's almost a little scary, but it's very, very interesting. And I thank you. My name is Joan Quittner. I am with Legal Shield. I'm a director of Legal Shield and ID Shield. We offer affordable access to the legal system for businesses and for individuals. I'm also with another energy company with the chamber called EGS, saving people a lot of money on their natural gas bills. Joan Quittner, Legal Shield, and I'm an ambassador to the chamber. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. James.
Good morning. James Collins, Collins Insurance. I do health, life, and Medicare Advantage. I want to get Albert's information. If that can be put up, that'd be great. But,
all right. We will make sure to get you that information.
Okay.
Sharon.
Hi again. I also echo James's request too, that I'd really like Albert's information as well.
We can definitely get that to you.
Yeah, I'm at the University of Miami, largely work on hurricanes with Brian and others. Currently in the UK on a sabbatical, but I've been roped in by our university administration to help build at UM an academy that targets problems that are related to resilience. So we're doing a bit of a market analysis right now about this very vast field, and also sort of building contacts with potential stakeholders. So yeah, it's a very big problem, and yeah, very excited to be part of, hopefully, some small part of the solution.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go to Bob Quittner.
Hello, yep, this is Bob. I thought it was fascinating. very realistic about what we're looking at, especially here in Florida. And I represent Broward Factory Service, and we keep you cool, and I'm an ambassador with the Chamber. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. Brian.
Unmute, okay. Hello, Brian McNolly. I think it's both Sharon and Albert somewhat already did introduce me, but I work at the University of Miami with Sharon. Do a range of topics, mostly centered on hurricanes, but I've gotten into the sea level rise thing, which that in turn kind of got me involved with the coastal risk consulting company. I started on their advisory board maybe 5 years ago or so. So it's been very, very, very much of an interesting thing to learn more about as the years go on. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Laurel.
Good morning, everyone. I'm with eSuites, a co-working space in West Palm Beach. I'm the community manager and I'm also a realtor in Palm Beach. Thank you, Albert, for all of the information. I have my master's in real estate development, so this is definitely a topic that we talk about a lot in South Florida about how we're going to build in the years to come.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go to Robert M. Are you able to unmute? There you are.
Hi, good morning. Robert Morrell. I'm a Senior Vice President with First State Bank of the Florida Keys. So obviously, I'm a resiliency officer, and with being in the Keys, you can understand. But our market, we do commercial real estate as well as residential lending throughout Florida. We've also been a client of Coastal Risk. So we're just keeping abreast of all the updated information.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Richard Hernandez.
Hi, how are you doing? I'm Rich Hernandez. I'm with the Palm Beach County Property Appraiser's Office. I'm the Director of Information Technology. So very familiar with risk and risk assessments, risk analysis. We do that quite a bit here. And obviously being a county agency, we deal a lot with areas of damages and risk assessments with the county itself. And I'm glad to be here. This is my first time.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We are happy to have you. Mm-hmm. Robert Banting.
Yes, good morning. How can I help you?
We are just going around and introducing ourselves.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Robert Banting. I'm the president of Anderson & Carr. I've worked in downtown West Palm Beach for 48 years. I do happen to live in a waterfront home on an island in the intercoastal, very close to the ocean. So I've noticed in the 30 years I've lived in this home, the sea level rise, and I've been a believer in the science for quite some time, so I find this very interesting.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I do see that Kelly so kindly put Albert's information in the chat box, so that is there if you'd like it. I will also make sure that each of you have that after this meeting is over. I do realize that it is 10 a.m. I want to thank Albert and thank you all for joining us today. Our next meeting, our science and technology meeting, is on April 1st from 9 to 10 a.m. and it will be via Zoom as of right now. I look forward to seeing you all again. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Go on and have a wonderful day. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.